Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to deal with the topic a historical study of cannibalism with reference to J.M. Coetzee's 4. Here is my academic information. This is a table of content. My research question is how has the concept of cannibalism evolved from historical and anthropological practice to a colonial discourse of power, and how has it been represented in literature and visual art? The history of cannibalism, originally grounded in ritualistic and survival practice, was interpreted by colonial power. This shift in a meaning is reflected in a literary and artistic representation such as J.M. Coetzee's Foe and Francisco Goya's Satan devouring his son, etc., where cannibalism served as a symbol of power, control, and human brutality. So in introduction, cannibalism has evolved from a historical ritual. So it some part it know as a ritual practices. At some it is for survival. That's how we find various perspective in this concept. And the ancient root of anthropology or meaning of anthrophagy. So earliest evidence we find in archaeological remain from Spain and France show a trace of human consumption. In Greek origin, we have a Herodotus in 15th century BC described the anthrophagy. It means men eaters of Scythia as a savage and lawless, establishing early link between. Okay. So classical meaning of this concept, anthropophagy means anthropes, it show human, and phagin means to eat. When human eats another human's flesh, it known as anthropophagy or cannibalism, mark the symbolic divide between civilization and savagery. And cultural evolution we find in Europe. Expansion tale of man-eater appear across religions such as Cynthia and Russia. And also we find this concept in a modern world. So the colonial birth of the word cannibal. So colonial function, European label native people cannibal to justify conquest and enslave. So whenever colonized people try to define colonizer try to define colonized people, they show them as a cannibal or brutal people. Then the cannibal trope has also been a great critical utility in post-colonial and post-modern discourse as the ultimate sign of epistemic violence. It also people connect with the violence, and English colonists resorting to eating human flesh during the starving time of 1609 to 1610 in Jamestown, reported by John Smith and the Governor George Percy, broke down neat dichotomy of a civil Englishman and savage other. The discourse of cannibalism, which began in the encounter between Europe and America, become a defining feature of colonial experience in New World, especially in Pacific. Then Cannibal in Novel 4 by J.M. Coetzee. So in initial part, we find the one line of Susan Barton, that I have come to an island of cannibals. So how Susan Barton as a white people described the people as a cannibal. No pirates landed on our shores, no freebooters, no cannibals, save your save yourself if you can be called a cannibal. So here we find the fear in Susan Barton that what cannibal can do. Was his talk of cannibal roving from island to island in search of meat, a warning, a masked warning against you and your appetites. So these are the original light that show the element of cannibals in this novel. And we when we apply this concept in a fourth, so cannibal is not just a literal, it symbolizes power, control and moral ambiguity. So we go beyond the literal meaning and take the metaphor. Then we find that Susan Bar how for try to eat the voice of Susan Barton. So here we find the metaphorical meaning also. Then The Man Eating Myth, this book by William Aaron, written in 1979. It's a report of ritual cannibalism, where often colonized invention repeatedly, uncritically by Western scholar. So the purpose of the myth to identify civilized self against the savage other, to rationalize imperial expansion and religious conversation, and the impact is the cannibal become a discursive weapon in colonial ideology. So through the practice of cannibalism, the cannibals show as the discursive weapon in colonial idea. Then the types and non-ritual form. So here we find in various country how they show the cannibalism. So in America it shows exo-cannibalism, where it used for a ritual purpose. Then in Brazil also it is the ritualized type for a revenge, veneration and courage. In Oceania it shows the Indo-cannibalism. There a funerary veneration of kin we find. And in Europe we find a survival cannibalism during the time of famine or another uh, thing. When we come to the major type of cannibalism, then one is endo-cannibalism, where the consumer member of one's own group. For example, a worry of Amazon River, act of mourning and spiritual incorporation. In exocannibalism, we find that eating enemies or outsider, when people defeat the another group and try to eat another group. Then no, In non-ritual form we find survival, medicinal use, that human blood, bone and mummies use as a cure in Europe. We find cannibalism and capitalism. So how this writer Zhu Yu's performance eating people show the quite contrary to guardian ourselves away from cannibal. On the other non-human side, we collectively are the allegorical cannibal in sense of both consumer and consume. Then the representation in art and literature. When we see the Gujarati novel Manvini Bhava, in this we find the concept of cannibalism in term of survival. When I mentioned the America and Oceania and Europe, that time we find that India is not there. But also in Gujarat, Pannalal Patel observed this thing and mentioned in this novel. Second is the famous painting by Francisco Goya. In this, he use this concept. Also in the neoclassical novelist Jonathan Swift used this concept in a modest proposal. And my stands for cannibalism, that cannibalism is a right or wrong. When we see from the perspective of a colonizer, we find that they stand himself as a superior and think that no one can eat another human's flesh. And they think that those who are eat humans flesh, they are uncivilized. But in right way, we have to follow the chain of food. In conclusion, that cannibalism also show the vulnerability, but at one side we find the ritual and survival purpose also. Here is my references, and now you are free to ask question.
So, Krishna, my question is that can cannibalism ever be moral, survival, ritual, or symbolism?
As I mentioned that when cannibalism portrayed in term of survival and ritual, that is okay. Also, we ritual perspective and survival we find in India also and another country also. So that's how it symbolize or survive or ritual, etc.
So, Krishna, is cannibalism inherently savage or it is a concept shaped by cultural bias and the historical context?
Yes, because those people use to eat flesh of another human being, they think for a they only think for a survival at one point. But when white people or colonizer try to imply that concept as a uncivilized and brutal people, then it complicated. So in a way, it uh, shaped by a cultural bias and historical context. Thank you, everyone. This is from my side.